5. Dancing to a different tune. They who dance are thought mad by those who hear not the music. Meeting Tiffany was a fluke. Mark suspected that much of what happened in Tiffany's life was more serendipity than planning. Tiffany was barreling out of a department store with parcels so high she could not see when she ran headlong into Mark. Parcels flew everywhere and Tiffany ended up in Mark's arms. When her wide blue eyes looked up at him and her luscious bowed lips formed a perfect bow, Mark was struck dumb. Stammering like a starstruck schoolboy, Mark abandoned his errands, carried Tiffany's parcels to her car, and asked her out to lunch. Tiffany's quirky habits and her tinkly laugh enchanted Mark. She was an easy conversationalist and followed Mark's every sentence with rapt fascination. Mark felt interesting for the first time in years. That lunch was the first of many romantic meetings for the two. Shell-shocked by his misunderstanding of young, athletic Sarah, Mark was not making any announcements about a new woman in his life on the home front. He needed time to test the waters and decide if Tiffany was merely a passing fancy or if what he felt for her had staying power. He knew Henry and Miss Helen would scrutinize any woman he brought home. Tiffany asked Mark countless questions about his practice, his patients, and his day. When it came to talking about herself, she was evasive and shrugged off his questions. "My life isn't nearly as interesting as yours," she said. "Tell me again about the kid who put a bead up her nose," she said, deflecting his efforts to direct the conversation to her. They'd been dating for 3 months. All Mark knew about Tiffany was that she lived in a large beach house off Sullivan's Island. She drove a Porsche and had an extensive wardrobe. She had been married once right out of college, where she had majored in kinesiology. She had no children and her parents were dead. Her brother and sister lived on the West Coast and she rarely saw them. Tiffany seemed not to have close friends, and if she did, she never introduced them to Mark. Mark found this strange. But then he reminded himself that his personal life and his relationship with Tiffany were separate as well. The space between Mark's professional world and his time with Tiffany closed one day when they were having lunch at a quaint inn near Charleston. They met Dr. Grayson, who had done some work with Mark when he was starting his practice. He was having lunch with his son, a computer engineer. When Mark introduced Tiffany to the two men, Matthew Grayson looked at her strangely and asked, "Haven't we met somewhere before?" Tiffany replied smoothly, "Oh, sugar, I'd have remembered if I'd met a handsome young man like you. Maybe I remind you of your grandmother." "I hardly think that would be the case, ma'am. My grandma's a sweet lady, but she doesn't look anything like you." "Aren't you sweet?" Tiffany purred. On the way back to Myrtle Beach, Tiffany was not her usual bubbly self. When Mark commented on her silence, Tiffany said she was tired. "It's time," Mark thought. Now that the Graysons have met Tiffany, it's only a matter of time until word that I am seeing someone reaches Marcia or Henry or Miss Helen. That's not the way I want my girls to find out about Tiffany. "I'd like you to come to my house for dinner on Sunday," Mark told Tiffany over lunch that week. "Why?" Tiffany asked. "Because I want you to meet my daughters," said Mark. "Do you really think that's such a good idea?" countered Tiffany. "I don't think it's a bad idea," responded Mark. "My daughters are part of my life. You're a part of my life. I think it's time you met." "Okay," Tiffany shrugged. "You don't seem thrilled," Mark observed. "I don't see any reason for us to complicate our relationship by muddying it up with other parts of our lives," said Tiffany. "But if that's what you want, then okay. I'll pick you up at 2, Mark said. When Mark mentioned having a guest for Sunday dinner to Miss Helen, she glanced at him searchingly and asked, "Anyone I know?" Mark replied, "No. It's someone I've been seeing for a few weeks now and I want the girls to meet her. And in answer to your next questions, yes, she's old enough to be my date and no, she's not a patient." "Well, that's a good start," commented Miss Helen. "Where did you meet this girl?" asked Henry. "You might say we bumped into each other," Mark replied. "Is this serious?" Henry asked. "I don't know yet," Mark answered honestly. "But, I don't want the girls to discover I am seeing someone by hearing it somewhere else." "That's a good plan," Henry agreed. "The girls are already curious about what you are doing when you're not here." "What did you tell them?" Mark asked. "I told them to ask you." "Thanks," Mark said. "No problem. What do you want me to serve on Sunday?" asked Miss Helen. "How about roast beef?" suggested Mark. "How about pigeon?" smirked Henry. "You're a funny man, Henry," replied Mark. "I'd try. Somebody going to tell the girls who's coming to dinner?" asked Miss Helen. "Leave that to me," Mark replied. "Ooh, you got that?" Miss Helen replied. "I'll just step back and watch the fireworks." Living here is like the 4th of July every month.